Welcome back to another edition of the Hang Time Podcast. Sekou Smith here in Atlanta. My main man, John Schumann, is in New Jersey. As always, John Hartzell behind the glass. And fellas, the holiday season is upon us. I mean, it's right here. The Christmas Day games are a mere couple weeks away. But there's action nonstop, John, going on around the NBA. Another busy night last night. Big wins for the Raptors, the New Orleans Pelicans, and Indiana Pacers with Victor Oladipo back in the mix. We're going to get with Keith Pompey of the Philly Inquirer a little bit later in the show. We're going to do a deep dive on the Sixers and try and figure out what is going on with that crew. Joel Embiid, Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, the whole nine. But shoot, I was watching the Pelicans last night, and I know they've had their ups and downs. And, you know, Anthony Davis went back to the locker room once again, temporarily with an injury. But I'm wondering, of all these teams we see around the league, that have to do something to make sure they put themselves in the right position come playoff time, is that the one team that must do something? I mean, I feel like the Pelicans are missing something, that extra person that's going to allow Anthony Davis and Drew Holiday and Randall and all these guys to take it to that next level. And I just keep seeing them night after night, how inconsistent they've been. Is that the team that, in your eyes, that has to make a change?
I guess. I mean, it depends on what their, expectations are. I mean, yeah, I think if they want to be a top 4 team in the West, there's probably a piece missing. And I think the obvious piece is like some size on the wing. Right now they've gone back to starting Solomon Hill.
Yeah.
Etuan Moore has been hurt. It all depends on how they view Drew Holiday also, as far as if they don't want him playing point guard, well, then Tim Frazier isn't really the answer at point guard. And I don't know necessarily if Elfrid Payton is either, despite his, I guess, relatively strong start to the season before he got hurt. But I also think that, just a competent number 3 small forward that can play both ways and give them more consistency would help. I like their, frontline rotation. Mirotic was hurt. Also, I think last night, the Davis, Mirotic, Randall sort of rotation works fairly well.
They just feel like, to me, they should be an elite team as good as Anthony Davis is.
And the whole Davis thing hangs over their head. And I think, the rest of the league sees him as a prime candidate to leave, whether it be L.A. or whatever, or Boston trying to get in the trade mix at some point. I don't know if he sees him. I don't know where all that's coming from. And if it's based in fact as far as how he feels about the franchise and his future. I think that's part of it. Also, the sort of angst and expectations and urgency with that team is obviously, when you have one of the 5 best players in the league, you've got to
you got to capitalize.
Yeah, you got to compete for at least, conference finals or something like that, or else you got to worry about, what this guy might do next, and when is he a free agent? And so that's always the big story around that team.
Yeah, it just jumped out at me watching the games last night. And there's something about Wednesday night. I don't know, the way the schedule's set up, it just feels like I'm always eyeballing so many different teams on Wednesday night, and you almost start basing these ideas on what you see on that night in particular. I don't know if it's because that's the night I'm in the studio and getting a chance to watch everything on the TV instead of watching League Pass on my iPad. But I start daydreaming about, what could be with some of these teams if they could get the pieces right. And we talked about, going in on the Sixers. We're going to go full Philly on the Hang Time Podcast today. Not only are we going to talk to Keith Pompey of the Philly Inquirer, as I mentioned, we're going to get a dose of Philly basketball history a little later with David Grzybowski, who it's a new book on the life of Hall of Famer Tom Gola. He's a 5-time NBA All-Star who was way ahead of his time in the 50s and 60s in terms of his game. So we're going to get a chance to dig down a little bit on that. And we'll do that after we talk a little bit more about last night action, because we can't overlook the fact that the Warriors got their doors blown off, at home by the Raptors with no Kawhi. I'm officially ready to get my passport out and lock down this final strip. I'm serious. I'm a believer.
I'm feeling
I wasn't sure early on.
I'm feeling a little bit more confident about who's going to be number 1 in next week's power rankings than I have been over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, they've been so impressive without Kawhi that I don't know how you could look at anybody else in the East and put them ahead of the Raptors. that depth and, the way some of those role players are playing. Fred VanVleet was awesome last night. Off the bench, just playing well. I know you love Pascal Siakam. His rise to me has been just crazy to see a guy go from being what we thought might be, kind of a nice little defensive role player into being a much more dynamic, player than that.
They're just so strong from like 1 to 10, so that when number one is out, there's still 9 guys who are capable of doing stuff and winning games. And like the Kyle Lowry turnaround is amazing. Like I was in Brooklyn on Friday when the Nets beat the Raptors in overtime, and that was like Lowry was. I talked to him a little bit after the game, and his confidence was shot. Like he didn't believe in his shot. Like not only was he missing shots, but he was passing up lots of shots, including on some big possessions down the stretch of that game. And you could tell, like, he just didn't believe in his own shot. So, like, he's over the last couple of years, he's been one of the best pull-up three-point shooters in the league. And then there's been times, not only in this last stretch, but even earlier in the season, where he would step in or he'd get a screen and it'd be like, all right, that's a shot he steps into, when he believes in himself, and he'd just be passing up shots. And then to sort of turn it around on this road trip, on this back-to-back, I mean, I don't know if there's a more impressive back-to-back than you can pull off than winning at the Clippers and then winning at Golden State, 2 teams that had only lost 2 home games each prior. And then Lowry, totaling 44 points in the 2 games, making 6 of his 15 threes. I mean, to have him back just means a ton for that team too.
Is it unfair of me to be a little perturbed at the basketball public for not giving Masai Ujiri the credit I think he deserves for the moves he made? I'm only saying that because I know if we were to take what the Raptors did, removing the coach of the year and replacing him with a guy, Nick Nurse, who's known as an offensive specialist, has come in and done exactly what you'd hoped he'd do. And then you take away a guy like DeMar DeRozan, the equivalent of DeMar DeRozan, a guy who's been a franchise player that you've grown and developed. You bring in Kawhi, you took all kinds of, heat from people for that. And it worked out as well as it did. If this happens in another city, if this was Boston or Houston, all we would hear about is how great Danny Ainge or Daryl Morey were. I'm serious. I think that would be an ongoing narrative. I don't hear anybody talking about Masai.
Oh, he gets plenty of credit, I think. I think people understand the job he's done. I still look back at that trade, and I don't know why the Spurs couldn't have gotten a Siakam or an Anunoby or even a Van Vliet or even a Dorrell Wright,
one of those young players. Yeah,
just
one of those
somebody to, and the fact that they got Leonard and Green in the same deal is just, and Green has been fantastic.
Yeah, he's been underrated in this whole thing. Big time.
So, I mean, it's going to look like a fantastic trade, and then, we'll see. It already looks like a fantastic trade, and then we'll see, obviously what happens with Leonard in free agency. But if this team gets to the finals, then, it's going to be fascinating to see, what he decides to do.
Yeah, a team that could get in the way of the Raptors trying to get to the finals is Boston. And I did get a chance to watch the Wizards and the Celtics go at it. Overtime game, Kyrie was Kyrie, with 37 points, 12 of them in the overtime session. I know that the Celtics have a lot to work out in terms of just the chemistry of their group and all that stuff. But we afford the Warriors a pass, even on the nights when they lose the way they did. I don't know if we're giving the Celtics that same pass, and I don't know if they've earned it, to be honest with you, Shu. But do you feel when you watch Kyrie perform the way he did and you know what the Celtics have in terms of talent, do you still hold out a little bit that they're going to make a run during this regular season, or that they will get it together in the playoffs and be the team that a lot of people expected them to be, in the summer when we were forecasting them as the clear-cut challenger from the East to the Warriors?
Yeah, I'm not going to bury them. There's still a lot of season to go. They're obviously disappointing offensively for the first 20 games. And I think, we're starting to see some signs of life on that end of the floor, and that's great. And I think the lineup changes that they've made have worked, and it is, it's not all just about talent. And, obviously they started the season with their 5 best talented players in their starting lineup, and that didn't work. And part of that is Gordon Hayward still trying to find himself and get his legs back. But also it's maybe it's a little bit of a chemistry issue. And Marcus Smart moving into the starting lineup has worked extremely well. And, they've even absorbed the absence of Al Horford. I mean, they're 5-0 without Horford, which is impressive. So, yeah, I mean, I think when it comes down to it, they're going to be right there. The Raptors are going to be right there. Bucks are going to be right there. And the Sixers are going to be – I mean, we've said this before. I cannot wait for the Eastern Conference semifinals, assuming those four teams finish 1 through 4 in the East.
Right. Of those four teams, Shu, that you met, seriously, I mean, of those four, rank them in order of the faith you have in their their makeup as presently constituted.
As presently constituted. Okay,
in
so
the Thursday morning, John Schumann Eastern Conference upper tier power rankings. Where do they rank 1 through 4?
I would say Toronto 1, Boston 2, just because Hayward, we don't know, if and when he's going to sort of be at full strength. And I still think guys like Jaylen Brown Brown is trying to find himself. I think Marcus Morris has played a little bit over his head early on. So I'll put them 2. Mm-hmm. And then Philadelphia 3, just because I think there's a lack of depth, and I still think they have some issues with the fact that, Ben Simmons doesn't shoot. I think that causes some issues with them. And then Milwaukee 4, although, they're really good, but just maybe just because the other 3 teams have so much talent.
Yeah. I like that list. Want to find out if our guest this week on the Hang Time Podcast feels any better about the Sixers than you do. Keith Pompey from the Philly Inquirer joining us here. Keith, how you doing, man? Appreciate you taking some time. We're head scratching sometimes on the Sixers team, watching them, looking at all that talent and wondering what else has to get done for them to get whole. I know the Markelle Fultz thing is lingering out there, even if, nobody wants to dwell on it. Is there another move to be made even after the Jimmy Butler trade for this Sixers team to get right?
Yeah, look, a lot of people keep talking about they need a shooter, which is true. But I also think that they need a power forward. They need depth at that position. I mean, ideally, you look at a guy like a Wilson Chandler, and you would say, for this team, the team could be better suited for him coming off the bench, providing depth at this particular time. So I think they need that. They also need to hurry up and do something with the Markelle Fultz situation. I mean, I think that, even if they keep Markelle, if they think that they can move forward with him, they still have to bring in a power forward. And then once they get rid of Markelle, I think that's when you can, focus on replacing him and his role, with someone. Because this team that they have right now, I agree with John that they're probably the 3rd best team in the East, but I don't see them getting to the conference finals. I just don't with the makeup that they have, right now.
Does Embiid and Jimmy Butler, does that dynamic duo, if you will, or if it's 3, is it's those 2 and Simmons, what is the ultimate ceiling for that relationship? I don't know if I believe that they've kind of coalesced as well as they can. I think there's room for them to grow. Do they have an opportunity to become one of those dominant 1-2 punches in the league?
I don't think that the problem is a lot of people, I wrote the article and a lot of people thought, Embiid was basically talking about, Jimmy Butler. He wasn't. He was talking about the situation that they're in. And I think that, because of, and I'm not calling anyone out or nothing like that, but you got to realize Ben Simmons doesn't really shoot the ball from the outside. So that can affect his spacing. And when you have a guy like Embiid, who's a better shooter, than Ben Simmons, and hey, let's just face it, he's a guy who will shoot the ball. Simmons won't. So he has to go out there and he has to be more in the perimeter right now. But in regards to, let's just say, Embiid and Butler, there's not a problem at all. I mean, the thing is, you look at Butler, Butler, what he wants to do is he's older than the 2. And he's a guy who really wants to focus on the playoffs. So he's going through the motions, so to speak, through 3 quarters. And then all of a sudden, the Sixers never had a closer. So then it becomes Jimmy Butler time. You know what I mean? Now, if he keeps, doing what he does, the Sixers are going to win games and everyone's going to be happy. And then the fact, if you get a little jealous of them, let's just say someone does, you look like a fool complaining because you guys are winning games. So I just think that when you have three guys like this, and you guys know basketball, when you have three superstars, one of them has to sacrifice their game. Exactly. And right now, and these are the two all-stars, so to speak. So, some people may argue they're not the ones that have to sacrifice. Other guys got to fit in around those two.
Keith, what has Brett Brown said about that Embiid, what he said about sort of popping out and catching the ball out on the perimeter is something I think I've focused on a lot, even before Jimmy Butler arrived and maybe even before, even going back to Embiid's rookie year, where I just feel like too many of his catches come 25 feet from the basket rather than 10 feet from the basket. And obviously Simmons' presence is, like you said, is part of that, in that, if Butler and Embiid are running a pick and roll and Simmons is standing on the baseline, then Embiid can't really roll to the basket because Simmons and his defender are right there. And if Embiid and Redick are playing their two-man game with their dribble handoffs and Simmons is on the baseline or in the post or something, that limits what Embiid can do. What has Brett Brown said about that as far as trying to get Embiid sort of catches closer to the basket and getting him, allowing him to sort of use his size more than he does because he's catching the ball on the perimeter so much?
It's funny because, in the beginning of the season, you've been around the team and you remember how Brett used to always say, we need Embiid to play bully ball. We need him down on the block. And so Brett Brown knows that Embiid is more effective when he's down low than he is when he's roaming the perimeter. He gets guys in foul trouble early, and he tends to have, he gets to shoot 10 to 15 free throws at least, and that's what the Sixers want. But it just seems like right now, he's looking at the strength of his team. And when you look at Embiid, you can say sometimes when you're so versatile, you have to take one for the team. And I think that's what he's doing because, as we talked about earlier, he's a better shooter than Ben Simmons. And, so Ben Simmons can get stuff. He can score, in the paint. So can Embiid. But they look at Embiid and he can also score from the outside. So that's the reason why they're doing that. Now, I honestly believe once they go out there and they get someone else, that all this is, everything's going to change. Because when you looked at Dario Saric's role, that was him. He was the guy. He was the spacer. He was the guy in the perimeter, while Ben Simmons was down on the block a little bit. So was Embiid. But I think once they go out there and they get someone else, it's just going to change. I think that the way that this roster is constructed right now after the trades, better suited to be out there than anyone else on the team.
Keith, you and probably everybody else in Philadelphia is tired of talking about it, but it's gnawing at me day after day when I see that team. And it's hard for me to fathom a team having a number one pick sitting in street clothes or not with the team, whatever, that they can't figure out how to maximize his value. Is the Markelle Fultz situation with the Sixers beyond repair? I mean, I know you mentioned earlier that if they decide to make it work, how he would fit in, but have they gone beyond the place where you can get him to play to the potential of where he was drafted? I mean, we're talking about the top overall pick, and now he's on a team with other guys, at least three of them, that eat before he does. I mean, he's got to get in line behind three other guys. I mean, he would have to make a stunning jump in production and play to become anywhere close to the player people maybe projected him to be as the number one pick.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that for both sides, it's time to get a divorce. I think it is. It's like, you're in a relationship and you saying, man, I love her, but she's crazy, man. I love her, but she's crazy. You know what I mean? And I think, they love each other, but it's time to go. I mean, because, Markelle, the Sixers gave up so much for Markelle that it's hard for him to live up, especially right now, to live up to the hype that, he has. Secondly, all the stuff that he's been through, I mean, we're talking about a guy who hasn't even played half of a season yet. You know what I mean? For all the things. And he's not able to shoot the ball. He's the fourth option. He's the backup point. He's not even the fourth option. He's the backup point guard. And not only that, it's kind of like it's become a circus. You know, I love Markelle. Markelle's a great kid. If you sit down and you talk to Markelle, you're like, man, this guy is great. But it just seems like he's getting the bad advice. You know, it's like, you know, it's just too much that comes with it. And I honestly believe if Markelle Fultz could go somewhere, and I'm gonna compare him to Evan Turner, and I'm not saying Evan Turner had problems, but Evan Turner was like the second overall pick with the Sixers. The people in Philly couldn't stand him because they felt like he couldn't live up to the hype. He goes elsewhere. He settles into a role. No one says this guy was the second overall pick. They look at him as if, hey, Elton is contributing to our team. He's a good teammate. And I think Markelle Fultz needs to go somewhere else where he can do that, because as long as he stays in Philadelphia, he's going to be recognized as a bust. And I think that is, you know, I think a lot of it's mental, but at the same time, he needs to go.
The question is like what team is going to take that risk? Because it's one thing like if you see Evan Turner not working out with the Sixers and you know what kind of player he is and you know how to develop him his game, or even a Jahlil Okafor, right? Like Brooklyn took that chance just to say, hey, you know, we know what skills he has, we know what he can do, we know what he can't do. But with this Fultz situation, you don't necessarily know how to fix, you know, what the issue is, right? Like you don't know what, you know, it's not just a player development issue. It's not just hey, let's just get in the gym and work on this and that. It's as if I'm another team and I'm looking at that situation from the outside, and I have the ability to trade for him, I don't know what I'm getting. Like, I don't know if I can fix what's wrong, right? Like, how do you know what steps to take?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's the thing, because, again, everyone is saying it's a mental thing that he's going through. And then you hear that, and some teams like, well, you know what? We can work with that. You know what I mean? We can get him in there. We could try to, you know, get him some help, you know, talk to, you know, some therapy, whatever. And then when they keep coming out with like, oh, no, it's this illness, it's that illness. And then you're saying to yourself, like, now, okay, now someone's lying somewhere. You know what I mean? So that's a major problem. Like I do think that there is a market. I think there's a dwindling market. But let's just say if you're a team that has, you know, young talent, you're a team that's struggling, and you're also a team that's not a free agent destination, right? Where that you may take a chance on him. But you would have to, I mean, he would have to hurry up and play, but you would take a chance on him to see what he would do. And then you have him since the Sixers picked up his option. You would have him for the rest of this year, and then you can decide moving forward what you want to do with him. But the longer, like, you know, he stays in LA and, you know, and he doesn't play, you know, I think that lessens the chances, you know, for him to latch on with a team. But, you know, I think that because he was the first overall pick, you know, you can go there and, like, and if you're, like I said, a team that's not a real good free agent destination, you could say to the fan base, look, we got a guy who was taken first overall. You know what I mean? We think he can be a good player. And if it doesn't work out, you know, we're going to get rid of him. But as far as like being on a team that's going to be a contender or something like that, I don't think it's going to happen. As far as the Sixers basically, you know, trying to get, you know, what they deem equal value, that's not going to happen either.
Yeah, I just one of those weird things, like I said, Keith, that just, it bothers me because I feel like whoever's fault it is, as you said, he can't succeed in Philly without a star turn that nobody sees coming, you know, in terms of his production in play. It's always going to be overshadowing whatever he does there. Is that, man, we gave up all that for this guy in the number one pick, and this is all we get. And that's a tough thing to overcome. I don't care how confident you are, how talented you might be. That outplaying the shadow of that bust tag has been difficult for lots of guys throughout the history of this league, wherever they go. Do we give Brett Brown the ovation he deserves for managing through all of these things that have gone on. We didn't even talk about, the Colangelo affair and how that went down. Elton Brand now being, the chief basketball decision maker for the organization. Brett Brown seems to me like he's been extra good, just managing all of the drama that this franchise has dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from. That's a great way to say it. He has managed a lot because if you think about it, I mean, even down to Elton Brand right now, like, there was Sam Hinkie. Brett Brown was the voice, like he was the mouthpiece. You know what I mean? He was the one that everyone said stuff. Same thing with Brian Colangelo, and you can still say, to a certain extent with EB, and that's just because Brett's out there. He's in the out in the front. Now the thing is, he can we can applaud him for everything that he went through that happened, but right now I think it's about to get real because beforehand there was no expectations really. Like even down to last year when they won 52 games, that came out of nowhere. And then when they lost to Boston 4-1, everyone was saying, what a great season. What a great season. Now we're talking about you had Joel Embiid popping off, right? And then now you're trying to like incorporate Jimmy. Now, again, I said I don't think Jimmy and Joel are the problem at all. But you have three egos that you have to manage, and you also have expectations. And see, with Brett Brown, he'll come out and he'll say, you know what, I have a young team. Well, Amir Johnson, although he doesn't play that much, he's over 30. J.J. Redick's over 30. Jimmy Butler's 29. And all these guys been in the league for a while. We're talking about Wilson Chandler. So you can't really get a pass like you did before, especially when your roster has 2 All-Stars on it and you have the reigning Rookie of the Year. So as much as Brett Brown deserves all the credit he received, I think that is up to a different level now, and he's going to be judged differently, especially if this team struggles.
It's interesting. This is a fascinating team, Keith, and we appreciate your coverage, obviously, giving us all the insight behind the Sixers team because it's been one thing after another, man. And I hope they do end up in that top 4 in the East, as you mentioned. The Eastern Conference playoffs could be, to me, as good as they've been, as competitive as they've been in quite some time. We don't have the specter of LeBron James hanging over the entire conference like we've had for the past decade. We got somebody else that's going to rise to that top spot. Speaking of top spots, every time on the Hang Time Podcast, John Schumann kicks us with some trivia. He hits us with a Schumann stat every week. And normally I have to get a lifeline to answer these. So I'm leaning on you, Keith, right now to help me out to answer John Schumann's trivia question. Listen, it's fair to cheat. I've tried it, and even that doesn't help me sometimes, but we're going to get this right today because I know I got expert help with the Schumann stat.
All right, you guys ready? I forgot to calculate I was looking at a Joel Embiid stat. I forgot to recalculate it, but he's on pace for something less than 100 3-pointers this season. So my question is, I was curious, I looked up 7-footers who have made at least 100 threes in a season, and there are 12 of them, but there are 6 that have made 6 7-footers who have made at least 100 threes in multiple seasons.
Wait a minute. Time out before we go further. Is Kevin Durant counted in this 7-footers list?
No, he's not.
Oh, come on. All right.
Official height.
All right, official 7-footers. Okay.
One of them should be fairly easy. He's done it in 9 seasons. He's an active player.
Dirk Nowitzki.
Correct. Let's see. The other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The other 6, one of them is no longer in the league. The other 5 are.
Mm-hmm. 7
One guy has done it 5 seasons. 5 seasons. He's won a championship in the last 5 years or so. 7-footer. He's won a championship. He won a single championship in the last 5 years. 7-footer who has hit at least 100 threes in 5 different seasons. 3 times with Phoenix, 1 time with Orlando, 1 time with the team he won a championship with.
A 7-footer jacking threes like that.
So you said he was in Phoenix 1 year.
He did it. He did it 3 times. He did it 3 times in Phoenix, and then he did it 1 season in Orlando, and then 1 season with the team he won a championship with.
A 7-footer.
Come on. All right, the team he won a championship was Cleveland.
7-footer
for the Cavs, who has hit 100 threes in 5 different seasons. He's back with the Cavs.
Oh, he's back with the Cavs?
Left for a little bit, and then he came back.
What's his name?
I'm having brain.
No, it's
got traded last year and then came back in free agency.
Oh, yeah. And he's from Phoenix, right? He's from yeah, what's his name?
It's so disrespectful. I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah.
Channing Frye. All right.
Channing Frye, but I hope he's not listening.
Yeah, Channing Frye.
Yeah. That's disrespectful.
Yeah, my bad.
All right, the next guy, he did it in 2 seasons. All right, there's 3 starting centers that have done it in 2 seasons each.
Mm-hmm. Current players. One of them is shooting threes more than ever this year.
Robin Lopez. No, not Robin Lopez.
I mean, the other Lopez.
Brook Lopez.
Brook Lopez, yeah.
This other guy, former Defensive Player of the Year, starting center in the Western Conference, been shooting threes a lot more the last few years.
Former Defensive Player of the Year.
His brother is also in the league. So it's another.
Would you say he was
Marc Gasol?
Yeah, Marc
Gasol. And then the other guy is one of the best sort of young centers in the league, 7-footer, one of the best sort of perimeter shooters among bigs in the league, young player, Western Conference, made the playoffs last year, not necessarily going to make the playoffs this year.
Karl-Anthony Towns?
Towns, correct.
Mm-hmm.
Next one is a backup center in the Eastern Conference. Was a top 10 pick. Has been a little bit of disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Went to the national championship game in college. Did he win the championship? I'm not sure.
Backup center in the East.
In the Southeast Division.
Yeah. I think plays for the Hornets, right?
Yep. You guys are terrible.
Is Kaminsky considered a 7-footer?
Yes.
Yeah, that's him, Kaminsky, yeah.
He is a 7-footer official.
Yeah. All right. And so the last one is the one that's no longer in the league. He might be playing in Europe, but I'm not sure because he came from Europe. Former number 1 pick, 7-footer, made at least 100 threes in 3 different seasons while he was in the league.
Andre Bargnani.
Flamed out, yes. Andre Bargnani.
Gotta be Bargnani, yeah.
So the other guys who've done it in 1 season are Dragan Bender, Spencer Hawes, Lauri Markkanen.
Wow.
Markkanen might have the best chance of eventually catching Nowitzki with the 9 season.
Somebody let Dragan Bender jack 100 threes?
He made 100 threes.
I mean, are you serious?
Yeah, last season.
Man, they let you do anything in Phoenix.
118 for 322. Not bad, 37%. And then Porzingis did it in 1 season previously. So.
Porzingis could probably catch.
Yeah, Porzingis and Markkanen obviously would be the candidates to get into Nowitzki territory.
Well, I hope Joel Embiid gets on the list at some point. You talk about people being upset.
He should get there.
Definitely.
Yeah, he will.
Definitely.
But the only thing about Joe, though, like the Sixers fans, they hate it when Joel, makes his first 2 threes early on. And then all of a sudden it becomes a 3-point contest. You know what I mean? But, he's better off when he starts off on the block and then expands his game. But, yeah, I mean, he'll get there.
No doubt. We appreciate it. Listen, Keith, great stuff as always, man. We appreciate you taking the time to dig in with us on the Sixers, man. Great content that people need to find on the, Philly.com, and keep doing what you do, bro. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Keith.
Hey, thanks for having me on, fellas, and see y'all soon.
Doubt. Yes, sir. Keith Pompey joining us there, seriously, your questions?
That one was a little tougher than I thought it was going to be.
I've had easier times in high-level college courses than I've had trying to guess the damn Schumann stat, okay?
It would help if you guys knew Channing Frye's name. But.
No disrespect to Channing Frye, seriously. Sometimes, let's put it all on the table. we tape this podcast early in the morning for guys who stay up late watching NBA games. So we do struggle a little bit if you don't get your morning coffee before you get to the Schumann Stat. As we mentioned, we were going to go hard on Philly on this episode of the Hang Time Podcast. And you know me, I'm a book junkie. I love basketball history. So it's perfect time to talk with David Grzybowski, the author of Mr. All Around, The Life of Tom Gola. David, thanks for taking some time first and foremost. Tom Gola's a guy that if you're not one of these, historians and a basketball junkie that loves to dig into the rich history of this league, you could overlook a guy who, in a lot of people's eyes, was a player ahead of his time in Tom Gola.
Yeah, for sure. I just think it's so interesting that, there hasn't been a book on Gola's life. Kind of backstory of how, it came to be. I actually went to LaSalle University in Philadelphia, where obviously Gola went. The arena is named after him, and he is, the most popular player, as well as like Lionel Simmons. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Lionel and his tenure. But yeah, I just think it's so important for, people like Tom Gola and other players in that era, that their stories need to be told. And, I kind of put my head down, and I'm a basketball junkie myself, and I just kind of wanted to tell his story because, he's the all-time leading rebounder in NCAA history at 2,201, and no one will forever break that record. I think the closest player currently in the NBA or most modern player was Kenneth Faried, and he had like 1,700. So it goes to show you that Gola's legacy, is forever being the leaderboard there. But I just think Gola's legacy and story is really important and special, especially Philadelphia based. He got into politics, coaching, he did everything, and I'm just happy, to be a person to tell his story and to continue his legacy.
Yeah, well, he won a championship with the Philly Warriors in 1956. Then he teams up with Wilt Chamberlain. Do you think the fact that Wilt came along had anything to do with him maybe, not being marginalized so much, but his greatness kind of being overshadowed, as a pro in Philly, when you have a guy like Wilt Chamberlain coming there, even if it's for a limited amount of time, you get this all-time great, coming in, and his shadow kind of overtaking everything.
Yeah, I've been telling people that in a way, and you look at it, especially statistically, like Gola's career in basketball kind of peaked in in college. And he was a popular NBA player, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't the same player he was in the NCAA when he was, scoring 20 and 20 a game and so forth. But yeah, it's kind of cool. Wilt and Gola had a great relationship. They were teammates for a few years, and I don't know, a lot of people don't know this because it's not really mentioned, but Gola was on the team when Wilt scored his 100-point in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Gola actually didn't play that game because he was hurt. So I always think about this, that I can't imagine what Gola's legacy would have been like even more because, like you said, he only passed away back in 2014. So I can't imagine if he played in that game, he would probably have been one of the very few people that were left on this earth that could maybe, mention that game and be a part of that historic game that people, still talk about, every year and every, when the anniversary comes up. So, but yeah, I think him and Wilt had a great relationship. Gola even spoke at Wilt's funeral. That shows you how much, respect they had for one another. And it's kind of cool when someone depending who you talk to, the GOAT and Wilt says that Gola was one of his favorite players ever. It kind of shows you the street cred that Gola has as a basketball player and kind of as a person too.
Yeah, I'm one of these people who likes to look at the old film from back in those days. You look at statistics and you study a guy's game. Here's a guy who, had 3 straight games during the 59-60 season where he tallied triple doubles. And with the emphasis we put on him now, when you got a guy like Russell Westbrook averaging him for a season, do you think his game would have translated to a time like now where you're playing a much, more free-formed offense in the NBA than you did years before?
Yeah, I think so. People have been asking me a lot of whose game would I monitor him after. I would probably say right off the bat, Draymond Green, someone that depending on the night, he can bring off the ball when needed. I know he doesn't do that, but for Gola to be 6'6" back in 1950s, that was kind of unheard of. And normally back then, if someone's that tall, you automatically, even if you're playing pickup on the playground, tallest guy goes underneath to get the rebound. But It was the opposite of that. I mean, Gola did everything. He did that, brought the ball up, he shot. Was a good shooter, and like I said, he was kind of like the triple-double player before it became popular. Like I said, obviously it was Gola in the 50s, and later came Bill Russell, and then you can kind of follow the symmetry of the players taking over errors, up to Kobe, LeBron, Wilt, and Shaq, and all those players now. So yeah, I would definitely say that. I would definitely think his game would kind of cross over to today's game. Then I definitely see him not maybe starting, but definitely a player coming off the bench that, like I said, he can do everything for you and kind of be a scrappy type of player.
Mm-hmm. I know guys have profiles in their cities, and where you play college is so unbelievably important for guys. Not for that generation of guys, obviously, who skipped the college process and went straight to the league. But when you look back and, if a guy's name is on a gym, or if you go into an arena and it's named after a guy, or it's on the floor at these, gyms all these years later, does that speak more about the legacy that a guy has? In Philly, there are probably people who are telling Tom Gola stories to this day from hearing about him from their parents or somebody in their family who watched him during his heyday. Does he have a bigger profile maybe in a basketball, in a sports mad city like Philly than he does even beyond there?
Yeah, I think so. And that's kind of why I wanted to write the book, because, I didn't want it to just be a piece where it's like, okay, he scored 20 points and 20 rebounds in this game and won this. I really wanted to show like what Gola was like off the court. I think obviously, yes, Gola was a great player. He was a statesman and like he was a very well polished guy, but at the same time, like he gave back to his community. He was kind of like, Sonny Hill-esque here in Philly, like giving back to the community with, basketball programs and just being that voice to the voiceless type of thing. Like I say, dabbling in politics and stuff. But yeah, I think part of the reason why I wanted to write the book is because I wanted people to know, like, I think people get confused, not just in Philly, but in general. It's like, okay, the arena's named after him. He has a statue, but why? Like I wanted to paint the picture of like why he has the statue at LaSalle, why the arena's named after him, and why he's so special. Why did he put himself on the map, but he also put, LaSalle and just his Philadelphia basketball on the map as a whole.
Yeah, this is, like I said, fascinating stuff as always when you get a chance to dive deep on the history of this game. So many guys, and I think it's a very important part, of what you've done here. And Mr. All Around, the life of Tom Gola is, we watch these guys on the big stage, David, and we think we know them. We think we know about them. We think, that we know their story. But they live a long life a lot of times after basketball outside of that spotlight. So some of what you do beyond the game, to me, is always enlightening about who these guys were as people and players, and what they go on to become. So a good read, perfect time at the holidays for people to get their hands on the book. Tell folks where they can find Mr. All Around, the Life of Tom Gola.
Yeah, sure. You go on Amazon. It's in Barnes & Nobles here in the Philadelphia area. You can log on to, I have a website, tomgolabook.com, and I've been tweeting also a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that's not in the book. My Twitter is David Grizz, David GRZY TV, and it's been cool. It's been a grind with the book marketing and everything, but I've been enjoying it. And like I said, it's a labor of love. Hope people can check it out. And like I said, if you're a basketball junkie, not just college or NBA, or just love the game itself, I definitely would hope people could check it out. And like you said, continue Gola's legacy, and hope people can check it out.
I appreciate it, David. Thanks a lot. Happy holidays, and hopefully people check it out, because I think the history of this game, as fascinating as the current game is, the history of the game is so much richer than people realize, and this gives them another opportunity to check it out. So we appreciate you, man, and thanks for joining us on the Hang Time Podcast.
All right, thanks, man. Trust the process.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll be back on Monday with another episode of the Hang Time Podcast. We went crazy hard on Philly today. Tony Luke ought to be sending me cheesesteaks right now, because we rep Philly hard. They'll have all the breakdown on John Schuhmann's power rankings on Monday. But don't forget, in the meantime, check out the Kia MVP ladder on NBA.com on Friday. I'm ready for your hate email. Yes, you called me a fanboy last week when LeBron James was number one. Who knows what you're going to call me this time around. Be sure to subscribe to Hang Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes all season long. Do not forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time right here on the Hang Time Podcast.
You